I started playing in 1959 when my family went through to visit an aunt and uncle in Greenock, and my cousin had just joined the Boys Brigade band there and had a euphonium. And he got the euphonium out to let us see it and hear it, and we passed it round and everybody tried to get a sound, and for whatever reason I got a sound of it fairly easily. So I said to my mum and dad, I want an instrument, I want to join the band. And a few weeks later my dad took me down to the learners class at Galashiels Town Band with my older brother and started playing then. My two younger brothers joined a couple of years later, and then my dad even took it up himself, so we had quite a presence in the local band. I left Scotland in 1969. I'd made my mind up, albeit at a very young age, that I wanted to join a band where I could also find some kind of career. And we applied to 2 or 3 different bands. Funnily enough, Fodens were one of them, but nothing came of it. And I was invited for an audition and interview at Camilaird's, and went down, had an interview in 1969, and joined them in the September of that year to serve a 4-year apprenticeship as a draftsman, and joined the band, which was at that time under Jim Scott. I joined Camilaird's on assistant second cornet, as you do, and having played principal cornet with the school band and the town band as a teenager, it came as quite a shock, the new concept of listening and concentrating and not just playing. But it was a really enjoyable start. There were some good players in the band, obviously, good conductor. On our very first contest, we were 6th at the national finals a few weeks after I joined. So in a way, I thought I'd hit the big time. And within about 15 months or so, I was actually sitting on the end seat. Halfway through my apprenticeship at Camilaird's, unfortunately, the yard had really been sustained by the building of the Polaris submarines, and that contract had finished. The yard was in financial difficulty and all extra things were being cut out, and the band unfortunately was a victim of that. Rex Mortimer, who was obviously the conductor at Fodens, had a connection with Camilaird's band, and he invited 2 or 3 of us to come and join Fodens, who had lost a few players as well. So it was October 71 when Teddy Gray had just retired, and Rex invited me to come down and fill the end seat at Fodens. It was great to join Fodens because they were a very famous band and a very, very busy concert band. I think the year before I joined them, they did over 100 concerts in the 12-month period. So it was very busy. We were a member of Men of Brass with Harry Mortimer, of course, so we were doing mass band concerts as well. It wasn't unusual to do a Foden concert on the Saturday and a Men of Brass concert on the Sunday, which would also have a rehearsal on the Sunday afternoon. So it was a very busy time, but obviously I was a bit unaware when I joined initially that there were a lot of older players in the band. Rex Mortimer was getting towards the end of his career, so it wasn't an ambitious band, it wasn't really a contesting band, but it was still a band to be proud to be part of. The most memorable performance with Fodens was probably the Sound and Brass recording that's now on YouTube, where they got together, they did like a short history of the band and got together all 3 Mortimer brothers, Harry, Alex and Rex. It's probably the only footage showing those 3 brothers together, and I was lucky enough to play Alpine Echoes, introduced by Elgar Howarth and conducted by Harry Mortimer. And in addition to that, the other band that was being recorded that day was Black Dyke, so half of Black Dyke was sitting in the audience as well. So it was absolutely memorable. It was a high pressure situation, but quite enjoyable. And then of course we also did the visit to Annabelle's nightclub in Berkeley Square with Georgie Fame. And Georgie Fame and Alan Price, who were quite famous in the light music and pop world, came to Elworth to band practice one night and went through, and he actually put words to the tune of Coronation Street, and it went down really well with the very, very wealthy people in London that visited Annabelle's. I never really had any one favourite venue, but there was something about arriving at the Royal Albert Hall, even if you didn't believe deep down that you were there with a chance of winning. The whole atmosphere of the place, the appearance of the place, the various levels and galleries, and it's just an incredible venue. I don't have a favourite test piece, but Eric Ball's High Peak has got great sentimental value because 5 weeks after leaving Scotland as a teenager, I was sitting on the Royal Albert Hall stage with Carmeliades playing it. And even to this day, I still think it's a fantastic piece of music. I do listen to a lot of the later test pieces that I realise are much more technically demanding. But I think High Peak was just got that little special place in my memory. I left Fodens in 1982, so I was with the band for just short of 11 years. I decided to try. I'd had some difficulties with my playing, to be honest, in the last 2 or 3 years. I decided to try conducting. So I went to conduct Tarpley, which were a local village band in Cheshire. And after just over a year with them, I was invited to go and take Greenway Selectors Band over at Biddulph. They were in the second tier, and we had about 9 years together, I think it was. And in that time, we got up into the top tier in the East Midlands and we struggled a little bit in that section because Biddulph's a bit of a band in backwater. There was no supply players. You lost your best player in the band and you've replaced him with the worst player in the band. It was just the way it was at that area at that time. But it was an enjoyable experience. We made a long playing record. We did a couple of local radio broadcasts. We did quite a lot of concerts, and yes, it was quite enjoyable. But eventually, the whole thing just took a kind of downward turn. We'd had long enough together, and I decided to take a break. Then I was asked by Colin Cranston to go and help at Robert's Bakery. I did a little bit with Teddy Gray at Royal Dalton. So I was kind of dipping in and out of playing and conducting. Then my good friend Tony Goddard was with Fairy then. He asked me, I was working in Manchester by this time, and he asked me to go and join Fairies. I went there. It only lasted 6 months. It was really a bridge too far for the age I was and the level my playing was at. But I sat on Fairies' front row for 6 months and got a couple of second prizes at the European and the English National. And then, of course, you may remember or not, I come back here for 12 months on the back row, which was equally challenging, having not played on the back row for about 30 odd years. But I had 12 months with the band under Howard Snell, and then when that come to an end, I joined a local brass quintet, Cheshire Brass Ensemble, and went along. I was asked to go by Don Till, who'd played the trombone with Fodens as well, and I went along just to give it a try for a few months and stayed 12 years. But it was one rehearsal a week, local, concerts were local, so it didn't interfere with anything else. And it wasn't the highest standard, but we raised a few £100 for charity every year, and it was quite enjoyable. And I did that until about 7 years ago, and now I'm just a pretty good listener. There were many memorable moments with Fodens. Obviously, I mentioned the Sound and Brass and the Annabelle's concert, but I remember also going to the Royal Albert Hall in 1977 for the Queen's Silver Jubilee concert, where Harry Mortimer conducted 7 bands. And to see 7 bands together and it was all the Black Dykes and Brighouse Fairy, etc. It was a very high level and a very good concert. Unfortunately, in true London style, the Albert Hall wasn't full, but it was still a very memorable event to be part of.
Well, started playing at Kids Grove Grammar School at the age of, I would say, 11 and a half. And seemed to take off quite well on an old beaten up trumpet cornet with a bend on it, a little bit like a mini Dizzy Gillespie horn, and seemed to take off, and I kind of never looked back. My mate, God rest him, was playing tuba, but he packed it up for football. He was trying to, because I was playing football as well, and he tried to get me out of the playing, but no, I just stuck to it. I thought it was great. And here I am. I thank the Lord. After maybe 5 or 6 months of playing, I went into the road band at Road Heath, which I'm thankful they're still performing. And so I would be learning all the time, you know, on the old, a lot of the old marches and things, and little cadenzas in the pieces, and then 1960. What was 61, 62, around 62 to 63. They recruited me into what we call Ted's band, you know, Greenway Moor, the Greenway Moor band. And not long for me, but I went on to bumper up with the band. That took me through to, what were we on, 63, 64, I had a classical phase, went through and passed for the Royal College. Cecil Kidd, Professor Cecil Kidd, for the audition, and but that didn't last long. I was still got brass banded. It was oozing out. Didn't want the trumpet, and went from there and applied for an apprenticeship for Fodens. And I've got a little story there about Greenway Moor, if I may. At school, we used to rush dinner down and go into the music room. There wasn't really, not like this, nothing. It was just desk. I think it was the geography room that we used, and it doubled as the music. So we used to find a desk and play. Anyway, cutting a long story short, Teddy Gray brought me a piece when I'd gone into Greenway Moor, Diadem of Gold, which I think I've still got somewhere. And I hammered this piece. You know, you get a piece, you like it, and you a lot of triplets. And there's one particular part in it I couldn't. Anyway, we used to pick Teddy up. I used to travel with a guy named Georgie Beach who used to pick up. He used to pick me up, go over Teddy, a lad at Congleton, Martin Steele, and it was one Sunday morning up at Biddulphmore, rehearsal, the schoolroom, Sunday school, and he said, "How are you getting on with that?" And I said, "Well, I'm struggling a bit, Ted." And anyway, people were dispersing, they were getting on the way, and he said, "Give us your cornet," because it was the same mouthpiece, you know, Cosy Cup 1.5. We'd all got them, you know, and he because he's always on that side, and he just rattled it off. It was just like, right the way through, like as though being shot out of it. And he said, "Is that any help?" I said, "Sure is." I said, "I'll get back to the grindstone then with that." Anyway, from that, we did contests, of course, a good contesting band, concert band. And then in August 65, I was 15, went to Fodens and started work at Fodens in the office. I was office lad and all that. And then Rex Mortimer called me up. He said, can you do your audition for the band? And he took me down the band room and did the audition. And so that's fine. And the piece was... And that was my first. I played that through, and I prepared a piece. Teddy helped me with it. Carnival Venice, Arbon, and did a bit out of, different movement. Anyway, that was it. So fine. And then into the band, which was a dream. When I joined the band, I went on to the back row with Doug Connolly, God rest him, and Mike Davies. And so that would last then. Took me through to maybe 3 months, 4 months. I can't actually remember the exact date. It's difficult. I've not got it written down. And then, of course, Jimmy left from being bumper up, and I was offered the position, which was like winning the lottery, I think, or even better. For me, coming up, I was eating and sleeping it. And then bumping up, and of course, Teddy, never heard him split a note in nearly 5 years. And I think I've still got the little bruise from his left elbow. You take the tasty bits, and then, famous one to remember for that was the Raymond Overture. When we get the semis, he comes in. So as to come in, bar, and back again, And so he worked me quite hard, but I thoroughly thank him from the bottom of my heart for it. Yet, memorable performance, classed as maybe highlight, as a kid at the time, just turned 16, going down to EMI Studios to do the Sousa 13 Sousa marches. And we got Norrie Paramore, God rest him, remember him sorting the drums out, the 3 drummers, men of brass, with the stereo. When you listen to it, they're going dated now, isn't it? But, you got dum, 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 and you could really hear it, how he'd done it, and it was just, the heavens had opened. Couldn't believe it. And they actually spoke to Matt Monro. So that was like, talk about an added bonus. And in that year, I know I'm going to the end of October of that year, there was the gigs, the jobs, I should say, shouldn't I, were just out of this world, really. I know we get like good and bad and with everything, but mainly, they were great. But coming to October, one major highlight was playing right up the top, which we had to get to in Westminster Abbey. It was just like you're pushing yourself back from the A1, And of course, it was a good year, 66. We got the cup, didn't we? And but they're just too numerous to even try and mention, the quality of the jobs. And of course, going to, I always used to like it at Milton Hall in Manchester, Oxford Road, for the breakfast specials. Because you used to get like Judith Chalmers, she'd be sitting at the desk, and you got this big coffin mic. You know, you've seen them, and when the red light went on and the adrenaline kicks in for the opening march, and Cossack or something, and or whatever. Fodens March, that is, because it is still Fodens March, I believe. Yeah, things like I could go, unbelievable. It could go on. Oh, favourite venue. I used to like the Civic Hall at Wolverhampton on the Men of Brass. Used to feel, you know, kind of proud. Oh, and one. We did the Three Trumpeters on a record. I can't remember the record, but we did the Three Trumpeters in Fodens Canteen. The guys came down, you know, and Harry. Harry was Harry Mortimer, of course, directing operations, and he came up after said, that'll do, because he was a top man himself, you know. I do like Lorenzo, because it has a little bit of magic for me, because as a kid at 14, I sat through the whole lot of bands in the King's Hall, Bellevue, for the Open, British Open, and I think Fodens were placed somewhere, definitely don't know, in the middle somewhere, maybe 12th, something like that. And it wasn't that, it was something else. But when it comes to the solo, the cornet solo in the middle, as soon as I heard it in played, Teddy, welled up inside, you know. I thought, because I'd heard all the others, I mean, yeah, Derek Garside, Norman Ashcroft, smashing players, but that sound as he used to produce, that unsickly, sweet sound with feeling, was just, for me, el numero uno. It was the tops. It really was. And of course they won it, 64, yeah. So I was chuffed to death. Mind you, I'd have been better if I'd have been in the band. But that was, of course, 65. So after like that, symphony and marches, there's lots of test pieces. Lots and lots. Gilbert Vinter, what a writer, you know, just superb. Right, I left Fodens, it would be late 70, early 71. I can't remember the exact date. And very soon after, well, I did a little bit with a trio. My uncle had a trio, and we actually played, you know, in the village halls, at the local village halls. And but I got my first professional job on trumpet at summer season at Pathelli. Did a few of those, and then basically I left brass banding behind, and then went into trumpet playing theatre, the Regent. I did the Regent for the best part of 10 years on the pantomimes, which was great. It was great, met quite a lot of stars, you know, and whatnot. And I've never looked back, really, until the COVID crashed in. My last job was at the Victoria Hall with a big choir. And that was February 2020. But I've been practising, I've carried on practising. It's got to stay, that has, because there's loads I can't do. I could do with some lessons, actually. Was that all right?
Oh, yes.
I get nervous, you know, I get very nervous.
No, you did okay. It was great. Fantastic.
But you have to curb them, don't you, the nerves? You've got to have your...
I'm still trying to find out how to do it.
Yeah, it never happens, does it?
No.
It depends on the gig, it depends on what it is, where it is.
Yeah.
It can be, I don't know. I'm trying to remember it's not running now, is it? No. Oh, I remember, I can't think of his name, the tenor horn player at Wingates. We used to do a man of brass with Wingates and Brighouse, was it? Brighouse and Wingates. And he used to, it was just, I think Gordon, it was Gordon something.
Higginbottom.
Gordon Higginbottom, oh, that's just what happens. And he used to come round, the schools came to Shabington when I was teaching at Shabington and sorted the kids, Titherington School, with the diaphragm, leaning forward and lifting yourself up, you know, when you're breathing. And but he used to have, I think it was a teddy bear. He used to have a teddy bear in the audience somewhere, and used to focus.
Yeah.
That'll do.
Take his mind off it.
Yeah. And I thought, well, it's
I
something.
conducted I was playing Fodens Band, and he was my conductor.
Walked and right.
That's how I knew.
Gordon Higginbottom, yeah.
He's still alive. He's on Facebook. He always posts
Right.
videos of...
Very fine player. Jim, yeah, well, I knew Jimmy quite well, because when I did go into the, I missed that really, but it doesn't matter, National Youth Brass Band of Great Britain.
Yeah.
And Jimmy was the coach.
Right.
But a smashing guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all, Phil McCann used to play table tennis at...
Yeah. Yeah.
I know he's still about and still going, which I'm really pleased about. And but like I say, I lost touch with brass banding, and not because I don't like brass banding.
Still, your career took you elsewhere.
I just wanted to, because I've got a gift, if you can call it a gift. Oh, that was another story, which I couldn't put in really. But we were on a man of brass job. And of course, I was getting into me jazz then, really. And improvisation, I was going to say, you know, but whatever. Go do gigs, they booked me for it, you know, on gigs, and no dots, don't bother. What we doing, what key? Yeah, it's all right. Whatever. And I've lost where I was now. Oh yes, I'm doing man of brass job. Yeah. This is the important thing. I'm doing something like, I don't know, I was maybe working on a piece, I don't know what it was. And he come over, Teddy, he said, if I ever, is it running? Oh no. If I ever catch you playing that crap again, he said, you're for it. Yeah. And wandered up. And he always used to, do you know how he used to warm up? He always used, in the stave, C. Come on then, that's it. That was it. Yeah. Never split a note. Never split a note. He was a hero, I suppose. He was a machine, yeah. He was a lovely guy, though. And I still miss him. Yeah. Still miss him. He was 82 when he died, of course, and it's still difficult with some to imagine that they're not here anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Just can't believe it. Like Walt Illingworth. Some of the when we were practicing at the Midlands, oh, that was another story, of course, but that was the old Fodens Band room opposite the Foundry, which nothing's there now. Yeah. And we'd done 18, we had actually practiced, I think it was a man of brass job. 18, yeah, it would be. Just reserve them and 18, 12, just bang them out. And we'd actually just, about half an hour after we'd left, it collapsed. That, if we'd have been in, I don't know what would have happened, but they built, that was it. And they moved it to the Midland Hotel. They weren't serving drinks like it. And Mr. Ted Foden was always used to turn up. Used to be sitting there, lovely. He was had a Studebaker. He was a lovely guy, Mr. Ted. And then Harry would be sometimes, you know. Oh, that was another funny story. When we turned up at EMI, Fairy Band were there. The bus. We rolled up. I don't know how long they'd been. Not long. We hadn't been there. 3-4 minutes, Morris Motors, it was Morris Motors then, pulled in behind us. The next thing, Harry comes out to greet us, and he must have just had his hair done, a blue rinse he'd had. Can you possibly? And it was really blue. Quiz some of you on that, and of course the buses were rocking, you know. We just, because he used to walk like that, he used to have a bit of a, just a little, and but he used to appear at the band room quite often. Whether it was a payout or not, I don't know, but yeah, they were good days, and I really, money couldn't have bought it.
No.
And sitting there like that, because it made me work, and when I played, it got to be right. Yeah. Any cracks, no good. Yeah. You'd been out, wouldn't it?
I started playing when I was 8 years old. I was a student in Hampshire, in Old Basing, in Basingstoke, just outside Basingstoke, and we had a visit from the Hampshire County Music Service. They came and held an assembly with the brass tutors performing, and at the end of it, those of us who were interested were given a chance to try out an instrument and see if we took to it. My sister's a year older than I, and the previous year she'd learnt the trumpet, and I thought that was very cool. So ahead of this assembly, I had the good fortune to have a go on a trumpet, and I'd learnt the C major scale. So I thought I was pretty much quids in. I was going to get a brass instrument, and it came to the moment, and I played the C major scale. You were given a few of the instruments around the room to try, and at the end of the day, a list went up on the wall for all those children who'd been given a chance to have free instrumental lessons, and my name was on it, and I was put onto baritone, and I was devastated. I wasn't on trumpet after all. So I started on baritone. I played baritone until I was about 11 years old, and then my brass teacher suggested that there was more opportunity should I play the trombone. I could play in different types of ensembles. You have to understand, though, at the age of 11, that means absolutely nothing to you, especially when you live in Basingstoke and there aren't any things like brass bands, and you've been told that the only thing you'll be able to play in is this thing that you can't see or hear or do. Anyway, so I moved on to trombone, and I joined the local orchestra, and then eventually did my auditions when I was 17, 18 and moved up here towards Manchester. I started at the Royal Northern in 1993, and in my first year at the Northern, I was asked to help out a brass band called Skipton Town Band, who were part of the North East. They were just in the North East area, and they were playing in the 1994 North East area competition, and it was Philip Sparks' Partita, and they were desperately short of a trombone, so I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. It had been a long time since I'd read treble clef on a trombone, so I thought it'd be good fun to try and relearn how to do that. I played for them, had a lot of fun. I was then asked by someone in their third year at the college, Ian Hogan, would I be interested in taking over his position as solo trombone of the Trafford Band, which a band that's no longer around anymore. So I went to the Trafford Band. I did about 18 months at the Trafford Band. And what was great is the Trafford Band had a Sunday morning car boot sale. It was great if you were a player because you didn't have to do the car boot sale, but they did pay you a retainer. So this was my first experience of receiving some kind of financial reward for taking part in an ensemble. I was given, I think, £40 a week to play with the Trafford Band, so it was £20 a rehearsal. And back then in sort of 1994, 95, that was significant. That was as much as my rent was. So in effect, it was taking a burden off of the family, and my rent was being paid. That was lovely. I played with them for 18 months, and then Chris Jeans left Black Dyke, so I was asked to go and play for Black Dyke. When Jim Watson was in charge, I spent about 3 months there. Jim Watson asked me to join the band, and this was in the day when retainers were much more commonplace in top bands than possibly they are these days. We know that finances are much tighter now, and priorities obviously change. However, back in sort of 1995, there was probably a little bit more cash in brass bands. Jim Watson offered me £5,000 a year to play for Black Dyke, and also offered me a chance to perform a concerto that would be specially commissioned for me to be performed at the Anvil in Basingstoke, which was my hometown. And obviously, as a as a kind of 19, 20-year-old, you're kind of like quite overwhelmed by it, and it seems amazing. So I said, well, that sounds fantastic. He said, no problem at all. If you go next door and talk to Jeff Whitley, the band manager, he'll sort it all out. And it's very difficult. It's at this time you realise why young footballers have agents, because they can deal with situations a lot better than I did. So I walked in, and the band manager said, Jeff said, "Oh, hello." He said, "What have you been promised?" So I said, "Oh, I've been told it's £5,000 a year and a commission of a concerto that'd be formed down the base." He said, "No, that won't be happening." I said, "Oh, how do you mean?" He said, "We haven't got that kind of money." I said, But Jim's just next door. This is the band manager's. It's literally like being in the back room." I said, "If you just want to go and talk to Jim, I'm sure he'll confirm what I've just said." No, he wouldn't have said that. So the offer is it's £50 a concert, so that's £1,800 a year. So I said, well, okay, that's very different from what the conductor said. And also, I'm playing at the Trafford Band at the moment, so that's less than I'm getting at the Trafford Band, which is paying my rent. He said, "Yeah, but this is Black Dyke." I said, "It's not going to pay my rent." So I'm really sorry. I said, "Do you not think maybe you should just go and talk to Jim so we can be clear about this? Because obviously I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable." He said, "No, I don't need to talk to Jim. That's the deal." So I said, "I'm really sorry, I can't join your band." So he said, "Son, this is Black Dyke." So I said, "Oh, thanks very much indeed." So I sat down. It was very awkward. So I went back through, sat down, and Jim was there. And there were some real old hands in the band. So Bob Blackburn was on baritone. Bob Childs was on euphonium. John Gillam on B-flat bass. I think Matt Baker was on principal cornet back then. And so in front of the whole band, Jim said, "So is it all sorted out? Are you all signed up?" And I said, "No, there seems to be some issue around the contract." And it's a very when you're 19 years old and you've got lots of very old wise banders there, it's a really awkward place. You know what people used to be like back then. So I said, "No, I'm ever so sorry. It's not sorted out." Right. So the rehearsal finished. Anyway, so that was it. So I went home, and then I got a phone call in January. So that was the Christmas of '95. I got a phone call in the January from Bob Childs to say that the band had met, the band committee, and they decided that they could find the money, and it was to be £2,000 a year if I would go and join Black Dyke. But in the meantime, I'd had a phone call from Howard Snell here, because Nick Hudson was leaving here, to say Nick was leaving. Would I come and join Fodens? So then I started feeling really awkward, because I was having conversations about cash as a 19-year-old, and it's not important, but when your rent's being paid, it is important. You've got a house to live in. So I said, "Yeah, I'm happily come and join the band, but just so you know, this situation," he said, "I don't have anything to do with that. We have a guy called Jerry Checkbook." Remember Jerry? "I have a guy called Jerry Checkbook, and Jerry will sort all that stuff out." And so I spoke to Jerry, and whatever it was all sorted out. And so I had to turn Black Dyke down. So I ended up joining Fodens Band. I joined Fodens Band in January 1996. So this is I think I've completed 26 years with the band, I think. So this is now my 27th year with the band. What I like about Fodens is the nature of the people that we have in the band. So two things really. First of all, the nature of the people that we have in the band. I think as part of the management committee, we've always looked at the personality and characters of those people that we invite into the band room, not just whether or not they're great at playing. And that's something that we've held sort of fast and true to over the years. And I think as a consequence, it's afforded the band a tremendous stability in terms of our player retention and people just wanting to be here. There are strong personalities, but those strong personalities are always positive in their strength rather than detracting. And I can only think of a handful of occasions in the last 25 years when possibly that chemistry hasn't quite worked. So it's always felt to me like it's just a nice place to come to with nice people and somewhere where you want to come and work and play. So that's the one thing I like about it. The other thing I like about it is the speed at which we get through music. I always have tremendous sympathy when we go to the Northwest area and we talk to some of the other championship section bands about the preparation process they've undertaken to get to that place. And you often you'll hear bands say that they've been working on a piece of music for 3 or 4 months, and I can't honestly imagine what it must be like to work on the same piece of music for 4 months. I think I'd probably die. But we're fortunate here that there's always been a long tradition of good reading that harks right back to Howard's days. And that sort of that ability to do it maintains a freshness that we have in the band room of a regular turnover of music, and therefore it makes it interesting. I remember my very first rehearsal with Howard Snell, and we were playing. I came actually into Dep on second trombone because Mike Fowles, the now conductor, he was on second trombone. He had an illness, unfortunately, right before the Festival of Brass, which had been back in '96, I think it was, January '96. Yeah. He was unable to play, so I was asked to. It was Nick Hudson's final job on solo trombone, so I was asked, "Can you come in and play second trombone for the week with Nick? And then when he's finished, will you take over?" So yeah, of course, happily to do that. And I came in, and we were playing a piece by, I think it was Gary Carpenter, called Chi. And then I remember the music went out on the Tuesday or the Thursday night, and so everyone's sight reading. And this is ahead of the Saturday, so it was like 3 days before. And I remember being absolutely gobsmacked by the fact that everybody could play it. Everybody in the band room was sight reading this really hard piece of music, and the trombones have got about 7 or 8 bars rest at the start. So I'm sat, Mark Frosty's on bass trombone, Nick Hudson's here, and I'm sat there, and we count our bars rest, and I'm not counting. It's the first thing we played in the band room. I'm just looking around the band room, going, how is that possible? How are these people playing this music so well? It's ridiculous, to the point where I missed my entry. So my first experience of playing with the band was getting kicked by Nick Hudson, right? That's why we still talk, but he says it was a gentle nudge. It was a kick. He kicked me on the back of my cuff. I probably still got some long-term injury bruising that I probably should talk to him about. But he kicked me and went, "You're in!" And I kind of came to my senses, and we played. But the reason why I was about to miss it was just incredible what was going on around us, which was this ability to read. And I think that, central to everything with Fodens, has given us over the years the chance to stay fresh, to play different styles of music, and to maintain the player interest, because you're not spending 3 months working on one piece. So I think that's probably what I like most. I think there are 2 or 3 memorable standout moments for me, performances that I've been fortunate enough to take part in. I think probably the most moving experience was playing Bram Tovey's Requiem for a Child's Skull, which we performed at the RNCM. I'm a little hazy on the year, but I'm guessing around about 2005, 2006, with full RNCM chorus, which was really something quite dramatic and passionate to be involved in, which I thought was amazing. I think the most frightening thing I've been involved in was probably the concerto that was written for me by Andy Scott for improvising musician, which was again at the RNCM Festival of Brass. So standing on your feet, trying to think for 25 minutes about what to play, and also playing piano was a real challenge. A real just a piece of work, in the months leading up to it, to really try and get my head round about how I could construct this piece. So you're kind of part performer, part composer. So that was really, really hard work. But ultimately, it's like everything else. When you put a load of work into something, at the end of it, you can look back with a degree of satisfaction that you've done what you needed to do to get through. But I think probably in terms of performance-wise, on a contest stage, we've been really lucky. We've been part of this great band for so many years, that there are a number of performances that stick out. I think the double back in 2012 with Daphnis and Chloe and Electra was a fantastic year for us, great performances. There are so many. I feel lucky that we, every time we step out on the stage, it's great fun, isn't it? Massive cop-out, sorry. Whilst at Fodens, I've been lucky enough to experience everyone from Howard Snell right at the start. I've been lucky enough to work with all the professional conductors we've had here, from Gary Cutt to Philip McCann to Russell Gray. I feel like one of those people who says thank you at the end of an Oscar speech and you feel you're going to miss somebody out. In addition to those, we've had regular resident conductors that have really held everything together. Mike Fowles, obviously, for the last 10 or so years. Tom Wiese has been brilliant. Brian Hurdley was a fantastic resident conductor as well. And it's always a privilege to sit and listen to these people who have got a plan. None more so than Bram Tovey when he walks in the room, and to just know that they've looked at the music and they've got an entirely set up, formulate an opinion of what they want to do with it. I also know that that isn't true of everybody who stands in front of the band. Sometimes it kind of feels like we're all on a journey together, that we're kind of learning the pieces as we go along, and then I suppose the genius of the person in the middle is that they'll find something that as we're doing it, that no one else has thought of or heard or seen. So in terms of who I've been playing with, everybody in the last 25 years, I've been lucky enough to sit and listen to. But I think we've all learnt different things from. There's different people in the middle of the band. Since I joined the band, we've been fortunate most years to play at the larger concert halls in the UK, be it the Albert Hall for the National Finals or the Symphony Hall for the British Open, or indeed, as it was, the Free Trade Hall, and it was Bridgewater Hall one year for the British Open as well. They're all great halls. I like the Sage up in Gateshead. I think it's got a great personality to it and a bit more intimate than some of the other big halls we play in. But I do remember many years ago we played at the Benjamin Britten Festival at Snape Maltings, which was this wonderfully open theatre that was just a very different atmosphere and just so big that it really stuck with me. So probably Snape Maltings, I think.
I started playing the cornet when I was 6 with the local village band, the Ellenbrook and Boostown Band. My mum used to work at the local school, and a letter was sent by the band to the school to see if any of the pupils would be interested in joining the band and learning an instrument. I joined the band and I received lessons off a couple of band members. After leaving Ellenbrook and Boostown Band, I joined the Walked-In Band, who at the time was conducted by Gordon Higginbottom, and then I progressed to Bessie's Boys Band on principal cornet in 1984. During this time, the band progressed from the 4th section up to the 2nd section, as well as winning the 4th section national finals. During this time, I also became principal cornet with the National Youth Brass Band of Great Britain, and the cornet tutor was David James. David James was the conductor of the Wingates Band, and a vacancy arose at Wingates on principal cornet. Due to my contact with David, he asked me would I be interested in joining the Wingates Band, which I accepted in 1990. At the National Youth Band, the euphonium tutor was Nicholas Childs, who at the time was the solo euphonium player with Fodens. In 1992, the principal cornet at the time, Martin Winter, had just got a job with the BBC Orchestra on principal trumpet. Due to this, there was a vacancy on principal cornet at Fodens, and it was through contact with Nicholas Childs to Howard Snell, who asked if I would be interested in auditioning for the vacant seat. I attended an audition with Howard Snell at the Royal Northern College of Music at the end of 1991 and was offered principal cornet with Fodens in January 1992. During my time with the band, I've been privileged to have won every competition with Fodens, including numerous Opens, national finals, French, Swiss and American nationals, as well as numerous victories at the Northwest Area, the All England Masters and other contests. I must say my favourite venue to perform in is the Royal Albert Hall. I think it's just due to the nature and the history of the building. I've always enjoyed being a member of the band. Bands often say they're like families. I firmly believe Fodens are. Over half of the band have been in the band for more than 15 years. A large number of us are originally from the Manchester area, but being in the band and keep travelling down to Sandbach, we all moved down to Sandbach. As well as the family connection, all our wives are friends with each other, the children are friends with each other, and this makes things a lot easier due to the busy nature of the band. When we're away with the bands, the wives get together and go out with the children. In relation to test pieces, I played a large number of test pieces over my career. Probably my favourite test piece would be Contest Music by Wilfred Heaton. It's got the famous cornet solo, with always a lot of debate about how long people have held the top C sharp for. Lots of memorable performances with Fodens. I really enjoy contest performances. In 2012, the band became the double champions, where we won the British Open and Nationals in the same year. The test pieces that year was Electra by Martin Ellaby, that was at the Open, and the Nationals test piece that year was Daphne's and Chloe, which was arranged by the band's former conductor Howard Snell, who was also an adjudicator at the competition. As well as playing in Fodens, I'm the current band manager. I'm responsible to the trustees and the vice presidents of the band, and I also work closely with the band committee. During my time as band manager, the band have successfully applied to funding from the Arts Council as well as the Heritage Lottery. We've had 5 successful applications, generating around about £200,000 of funding for the band to carry out a number of projects in the community, leaving legacies and maintaining the profile of Fodens in the wider musical world. During my time at Fodens, I've had the privilege of working under a number of leading conductors, including Howard Snell, Nicholas Childs, Michael Fowles, Gary Cutt, Russell Gray, Alan Withington, and it's always a pleasure for the band to be able to work with Banwell Tovey, as well as being one of the world's leading orchestral musicians, conductors. Banwell is also the president of Fodens. My first major job with Fodens was in 1992 at the Festival of Brass, where we had to perform 6 test pieces. Shortly after that, my most memorable performance with the band was in the May of 1992, when the band became the European champions. That was 30 years ago this year, and this year, 30 years later, we're looking forward to once again representing England at the European Brass Band Championships to be held at the Symphony Hall in Birmingham. Sadly, in 2016, the band suffered a serious fire at our then rehearsal premises at Flowcrete in Elworth. Sadly, the fire ripped through our rehearsal room, destroying the large majority of our equipment, and sadly we lost all our library. This consisted of a number of original manuscripts as well as countless amounts of memorabilia. Following on from the fire, we was then lucky to be able to start rehearsals at the rehearsal premises of the co-op band, thanks to the generosity of Jeff Sparks. And later that year, we was able to secure our rehearsal place, which is where we currently are, at Badwell Hall in Sandbach. So this year, I celebrate my 30th consecutive year as principal cornet with the band. It's been a privilege to have led one of the world's most famous brass bands during this time. Hopefully, there's still a few more years left in me playing wise. We've got a number of exciting recording and Arts Council related projects to look forward to, as well as generating a number of new heritage material for our heritage website, and also developing a museum of Fodens Band artefacts over the coming years. Thanks to the generosity of the Heritage Lottery, we're currently in the process of recording personal memories. This is to save memories and stories from ex and current members so that these are saved and preserved for future generations. So, Tom, can you tell me how you started playing, please?
I've started playing in a music school in Switzerland, and actually when I first went to the school, I wanted to play the cello. And in those days, in the olden days, they didn't have any sort of half-size and three-quarter-sized instruments. So the director there gave me a trumpet and said, play this until you're a bit bigger. And that's how I started that. And after that, I sort of moved on to baritone. I wasn't quite suited to the small mouthpiece, and then wasn't too suited to the baritone either, and ended up on the tuba. Yeah, the bands I played with in Switzerland were which is one of the top bands still at the moment, is the BBO, the Berner Oberland Brass Band. And also a thing we had is often the National Youth Brass Band of Switzerland, which was great because, as you know, you've been there yourself. As a tutor, they always have a set of British tutors, so we had brilliant conductors and tutors coming across and sort of encouraging you, and actually that's how I was sort of encouraged to then move to Britain to come and study. I studied in Huddersfield. At the time it was the Huddersfield Tech. They had a good brass band course going, and there was a couple of other foreign students there as well, and through them, I was sort of chatting through with them, they sort of said, yeah, come here. And at the time there was Philip McCann was there, Peter Parks, Jim Shepherd, so you had like the, you know, who's who in brass banding. And as a tuba tutor, I had Andy Duncan, who at the time played with the Halley Orchestra, and also Brian Kingsley, who was at the Opera North. Before joining Fodens, I played in Huddersfield, there used to be the Huddersfield Technical Band, or Technical Band, and then I think it turned into the Sellers Engineering Band a little bit later. I played with them, and then had a very short stint at Grimethorpe Colliery, and it was then, I think Howard Snell, he was doing some work with the band then, and I'm not sure if I think they tried him to go there, and he was at Desford and Fodens at the time, and he said to me, why don't you come and play with Fodens? And that's how I got to start coming down here and playing with the band. I joined Fodens in, I think, back end of 1987, and I left 95-ish, something like that. Well, the most memorable performance, we did a lot of good performances, and some of them got rewarded and others probably less so, but probably one of the highlights with what we got out of it, probably the European Championships in Cardiff, I think they were in 92, particularly the Own Choice piece where we played Year of the Dragon, and that seemed to be a very magic performance and a great performance to be part of. That probably ranks up as near the very top, if not the top anyway. Favourite venues? Well, I suppose it's always the Open and the National are great venues to play at. I did too when I first joined the band. The Open was still at the Free Trade Hall in Manchester, and before it then moved down to the Symphony Hall. I think there was one year it was at the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester. So those big concert venues, and then even, you know, like sort of local gigs like the Victoria Hall in Stoke and places like that. But in terms of big places, yeah, probably the Albert Hall and Free Trade Hall, Symphony Hall, and the Europeans we did in Rotterdam, you know, in the bigger acoustics. Yeah. Favourite test piece? Difficult one. Sort of as a bass player, I remember when Philip Sparks' Partita was first written, and there was quite a big sort of E-flat solo in the first movement, and I suppose purely from a selfish point, I would probably choose something which featured the E-flat bass quite heavily. I like playing lots of different pieces, challenging stuff. And in terms of test pieces, I mean, we did in the early 90s those Britannia season concerts for a couple of years, I think.
and those concerts, I mean, the concept was, I think, was two test pieces in the first half and 3 in the second half. So it was a proper challenge playing those sort of works, and I enjoyed playing them all, really. Well, socially in the band, we had a good group of players, and I suppose overnight stays were always very much enjoyed. Some probably a bit too much than what we should have done. And I do remember one of them. I can't remember where it was. I remember the night though. It was somewhere down south, and we'd probably stayed up a bit too long and had a bit of a top shelf competition, as we used to call it. And then the next day we had a matinee concert, and I think the band was rather a bit tired. And I remember how we're getting the band together for an interval talk, which didn't happen very often, just to make sure everybody woke up and started playing in the second half. Well, playing-wise, I didn't really do much more playing after that, because I was sort of in a little bit of a dilemma. I started conducting at the time and had initially quite a lot of success as a conductor, and then it was the normal sort of thing, dates of clashing and competition. That Fodens been in the same competition as perhaps one of the bands I took or so. So it was sort of came to a head of. In those days, I think we were a lot less flexible than we are these days. I mean, these days you could probably conduct a band and play in one. I mean, there's plenty of players, of musicians who do that. In those days, it was you were either at one place or the other. So in terms of playing, just with the quintet we had, we still did quite a few sort of gigs with that. But in terms of band playing, none really after Fodens. Well, the first band I started as conductor was Northup Band, and they were in the championship section, obviously based in North Wales, and I think we had something like won the first 9 competitions in a row, and qualified for London, first time I think in the band's history in the championship section, and then. From that, it then sort of led to guest conducting other bands, doing competitions as a pro conductor, and yeah, that's about it. Yeah. Well, my relationship with Howard was, as I mentioned earlier, I met him when he was actually he was one of the conductors who was over with the National Youth Brass Band of Switzerland well before I moved over here. So I came across him then. I didn't really meet him. I mean, he was sort of, he was almost like God. You couldn't really approach him in those sort of as a player of the band. But then I met him when he did some conducting at Grimethorpe, and got chatting to him, and when he invited me to come down to Fodens and join the band, and then I sort of started studying. He offered me that I could study with him, and I think I ended up doing about 4 years with him, and we had a really good relationship, and he had the farm in Hollington at the time, and I used to stay there overnight and help him with his Rakeaway publishing as well. And I did conducting and arranging with him, and yeah, he was very, very good. I was very lucky to have met him, and even when I started first conducting, he offered to come along to those bands and sit there and have a listen and advise me and help me out that way. I do remember one of the first conducting things I did, he said, "Oh, I'm going up to Scottish Co-op," and because he was the professional conductor then, and we were driving. I met him on the motorway from Huddersfield, the M6, and we were driving up together, and it must have been about 5 minutes outside Glasgow. He goes, "Tom, there's a score on the back seat. I want you to take the band through that piece later." And I thought, well, you could have given me a little bit more warning than 5 minutes, and it ended up being Freedom by Bath, which isn't the easiest piece to conduct. And then he started the rehearsal and showed them how it's meant to be done. And then I sort of had to follow him, which was, I suppose, if you're thrown into the deep end, you can see if you can swim or sink, I suppose. When I was at Fodens, to be fair, we didn't really have any other guest conductors. I can honestly, I think the only one I played in was Jim Scott, who came and did a concert. Apart from that, I think Howard did every single rehearsal. In terms of guest conductors, Jim Scott's the only one I can remember who did a concert with the band. In those days, it was just the same as, all that time I spent in the band. Those, I think, near enough 8 years. I think I missed 2 rehearsals, and that was due to getting married, because obviously my wife, she played in the band as well. And I remember going and asking Howard, as I said, we're getting married. I won't be at the rehearsal on Thursday. And he goes, do you really need Thursday off? And I said, well, the wedding's in Scotland, so we, and people are coming over from the continent, so we can't just go up on the Saturday and get married on the Saturday. And then I did ask him for the following week for the Tuesday off as well. And I remember his answer was, how long does it take to get married these days? So in those days, it was just much more, you couldn't really miss. And you had, I think, behind every chair, you had a couple of players lined up. So if somebody wasn't there or was slipping up, there was a replacement for you there before you knew it. And it was just a different kind of banding, I suppose, then.
Well, I started to play when I was probably 13 or 14, when my uncle Stanley, my father's brother, he conducted a band in Derbyshire called Bolsover Colliery. And I asked him to give me a cornet, which he did, and he brought the cornet to Bellevue Contest. And I had it under the table. We were having a cup of tea, and this fella came and sat with us. I didn't know who the fella was, and said, whose is this cornet case under the table? And of course, I was a teenager. I said, it's mine. Oh, he said, can you play it? I said, well, I don't know. I've not tried yet. I've only got it today. He said, well, you take it home and practice it. And that fellow was Harry Mortimer. And I didn't know then, later in years, that I was going to be playing for him. So that was a bit of a surprise, really. So that was about the time that I started to play. My father already played. He used to play in Abram Colliery Band. But that's the gist of how I started. I started to play with a band in Wigan called Wigan British Legion Band, which is now gone. Every band that I've played with has gone. Then I left there and I went to play with Standish and Coppell Band. And that was when a gentleman called Harry Bentham, who was the conductor at that time, put me on soprano, which I played ever since up until the last few months. Then I left there and I went to Wingate's. I played with Wingate's band for about 7 years. Then I left Wingate's and I went to play with a band which is also gone, called Hay Band in Wigan, which we used to go around to contests, these own choice contests where you could play what you like. We used to play Epic Symphony. And I left there and I went to a local band nearby to where I lived called Lower Ince Temperance Band. It wasn't Temperance, but that was the name of the band. And I played with them. And then it was whilst I was playing with them that I was asked to come to Fodens. I had a phone call from Rex, and he said, I believe you're interested in joining Fodens Band. But at the time, my father, who was a coal dealer, coal merchant, was retiring. And he asked me, he said, do you want to take the business on? Or do you want to, shall I sell the business? I said, no, I'll take it on, I'll have a go at it. So when Rex rang me, I said, well, yes, I'd like to come, but I'm going into business and it'd be a bit difficult for me to get there, and so on and so forth. And he said, well, he was a very canny man, was Rex. You couldn't beat him. He said, how do you know you're good enough? I said, well, good question. So he said, why don't you come down and let me listen to you play? So I came down one Saturday morning and he took me in the band room and asked me to play various bits and pieces of different things. I played something which I'd prepared myself. And then he said, right, I'd like you to come on Monday night rehearsal if you could, because Harry's coming to take the band then, and I want Harry to listen to you before any decision's made. So I came out, I had to tell my father, and that my father said, well, what, you'll have to go, won't you? He said, otherwise you'll never know whether you were good enough or not. So I went on the Monday night, I did the rehearsal, and then I was coming out to come home when a gentleman called Ted Swindles, who was then the librarian of the band, came running after me and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. You've not got a uniform. I said, well, I don't need a uniform, I'm only doing the area. He said, no, you're playing on Wednesday night. I said, where? He said, Manchester Town Hall. Rex says you're playing, you want a uniform, come and get a uniform. So that was it. And that was the start. No, I didn't. I took over the coal business of my father. And being as I was working for myself and I was my own boss, I was able to get the time to come down to rehearsal and to do the jobs. So that wasn't inconvenient. So I didn't work at the factory at all. Not then. Eventually, I had to sell the business because they started to make smokeless zones, and my business was going down the tubes because people were having gas and electric instead of coal. So I had to make a decision as to whether to buy somebody out or whether to sell the business. So I decided to sell the business and asked Rex Mortimer, could he find me a job at Fodens, which he said he could. And so that was it. That was when I moved down here in 1972 to work at Fodens. I worked in the car garage, which was a place where we maintained all the transport. Mostly the directors' cars and all the cars that the reps used and stuff like that. And that's what we did. Yeah. Well, a lot really. I think the first performance was the area when we played Symphony of Marches. We came second that year. Camel Laird's won, and Rex Mortimer conducted both bands. He conducted Camel Laird's and he conducted Fodens. And so apparently Fodens told him that he hadn't to conduct another band which was in competition with us. But he'd taken that band from the fourth section right up to the top section, had Rex. Anyway, that was it. And then the next competition we were going to was Bellevue, the British Open. So we went to the British Open and we played a piece called Lorenzo and we won. And I thought, well, I wasn't settled, but I was indecisive. This was before I came to Fodens to work. I was still working in the coal business then. And I thought, I'm on a good thing here. I might as well stay, you know, because we won the British Open, which I did. And then I played with the band at the Albert Hall on Variations on a Ninth. We didn't win anything that day. But as regards to important things, one of the important things that stands out in my mind was when we made an LP. There used to be big LPs in those days. We made an LP with the Men of Brass, conducted by Malcolm Sargent, on all his arrangements that he'd done. I've got the record at home. It's brilliant. So that was an interesting episode. Well, my favourite test piece to play, I have to say, was Epic Symphony, because I really did enjoy playing that. After that, I suppose I'd have to say Lorenzo, because we won the British Open on that. Well, I did enjoy playing for Rex. He was a nice chap, was Rex. He looked after the players, and yeah, he was good. Yeah, enjoyed playing for him. I lost my job in 1980 when the firm, everybody at the company more or less lost their job. There were a few people who were kept on. Jimmy Charles was one of them. He was lucky, but I wasn't. I got sacked. But luckily for me, I was conducting then. I'd packed in playing in 1972, and I was conducting a band in Congleton called Beresford's Band. And Mr. Sabir, who was company director, said, "What am I going to do now that Fodens have packed up?" I said, "Well, I'll find out who my friends are now, as regards getting another job." I'd actually thought about moving back to Wigan and seeing if I could. Dick Evans was conducting Leyland at the time. I was going to see Dick and see if Dick could fix me up with a job on cornet at Leyland Band, and I'd get a job at Leyland, which it didn't materialise, because he said, "What's going to happen to our band if you go?" I said, "Well, that's tough, but I can't do anything about that." And he said, "Well, we'll find you a job," which they did. They found me a job doing the internal posts in the factory, and also some chauffeuring, picking people up at the airport and taking people back to the airport. Well, there have been many venues, but one of my favourite venues has to be the Albert Hall. I loved playing in there because it was so easy to play in. And the first time I played at the Albert Hall was with Wingate's band, funnily enough, long before I came to Fodens, which was okay, that was fine. I've played Westminster Abbey has to be one, York Minster, Winchester Cathedral, Festival Hall. I played at the Festival Hall with the Men of Brass on a piece by Gilbert Vinter called I can't remember what it was called now. The Trumpets. And Gilbert Vinter conducted that as well. So that was good. That was at Festival Hall. So I think I've played most of the big places in the country. I think I came back as a librarian into the early 90s, because in 1990 I left Beresford's. I was a bit of a loose end, and then my friend Jim was a librarian at Fodens then, so I came back to sort out the old library, which unfortunately we lost in the fire when the band room burned down. But that was it, be early 90s, yes. And I've sort of been stuck here ever since, really.
I would be about 10 years of age. I always had an interest in brass instruments, but I didn't actually have a cornet until I was 11 years of age. I played on bugles and different things, but at the end of the 40s, it wasn't easy to come by instruments, but I eventually got a boozy cornet, and my Uncle Arthur taught me from there. It didn't have a case, so I kept it in a Palethorpe sausage box and took it to bed with me. That's the truth. I didn't have many teachers. I had Uncle Arthur, and then there was Tom Smith in the band, who was a disciplinarian, and then I went to Bramgay, to the Birmingham School of Music from 1956 till 1960. I heard my band was Aldridge Town Band at the time. They were a third section band. They were a very good band. The only first section band I played before Fodens was John Thompson's band, were at Wolverhampton, and Bram was the conductor of that. And I actually did the London Parks job with that band, with Rex conducting. So I didn't know Rex at all then, but I did play under him before I actually came to Fodens, but only as a guest with John Thompson's. I was originally thinking of going to a band at Horden Colliery because I was an apprentice electrician in the coal mines. And I started my apprenticeship there, and I got my underground papers, and I worked underground. And I fancied going to a band called Horden Colliery in the northeast. And they were a very good band. I went up there, and I thought if I go up there, I can carry on my apprenticeship. And because a mining apprenticeship at that time was very good. Anyway, Bram asked me if I'd like to go to Fodens, and I said I would. So on his recommendation, he wrote to Rex, and Rex offered me the position. Well, sorry, I'm jumping the gun. I went for an audition in the October of 1960, and Rex offered me the position of fifth man down. That was the actual position he offered me. So you don't usually have 5 men down, do you really? But that's what I was offered, and I joined. My first official rehearsal with Fodens Band was December the 12th, 1960. And that's how I came to be here. Well, I came on the Monday, the 12th of December 1960, and I moved into New Street with Mary Wood, a widow, which was close to the band room and also close to the works. And I stayed with her for 6 years. And I started work actually the next day in the erecting shop. I couldn't get an apprenticeship because I was only 16. I couldn't get an apprenticeship as an electrician, but I had one as a fitter, which was a good job. It wasn't a well-paid job. I mean, to give you an example, my last wage at the colliery was £4.17 which is about £4.75. When I came to Fodens, it was about 50 shillings, £2.50, which is a big drop. But Rex, the band, paid my lodgings, which was £3 a week at that time. So I didn't do bad at it. It was okay. As Granville said before, Rex always looked after us. He looked after the band. I think Lorenzo's got to be one of them, because we did win. It's the only major contest that I've actually won was the Open in 1964. And actually, at that time, I was sat next to Granville. On the record, I played third man down or second man down, but on the contest, I played next to Granville, and that's the biggest contest I've actually won. I've never won the national. Several Masters contests, which were good wins and entertainment contests, but I never won the national. Yeah, Howard Snell came to the band in 1982, and I was the only player that spent the full 16 years of his tenure here, and which was quite an experience. I was never close to him in those early days, but as time goes on, I did grow closer to him, and it was really a tremendous experience being with Howard for 16 years. And I had the library, and I think I used to try his patience a little bit at times, because if things were really good, he'd call me Jimmy. If they weren't so good, he'd call me Jim, and if things went wrong, he'd call me James. Well, I think it was 19 '64, we made a record with Malcolm Sargent. That was quite an experience. There were all his own arrangements, as you've already been told, of course. And I think we made a Vale. I'm not quite sure where we made the record. I think it might have been that. But I always remember about Malcolm Sargent. He was really dressed so well, but you know his singing was awful, really terrible, and he used to really exaggerate. Well, I'm not going to do it because I'm sure that's not what you want to hear. So, also, we played under Gilbert Vinter. He was a tall man, it must have been 6'6" or 6'7", very tall man. But I didn't meet him personally, but he was a nice person, and so was Malcolm Sargent actually. Played under Vilentowski. Also, I can't think of his name. He conducted the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra. Charles Groves. He was a nice person. And of course, Ali Mort. We did lots with Ali Mort because, Ali Mortimer, I should say. And yes, the time has gone pretty quickly, really. I mean, over 60 years, it's gone very quickly, really. Well, I played cornet most of the time. I played cornet. I came as fifth man down, and then I played on rep piano. That's next to the soprano, as it was then, and that was always my favourite position. I had played third man down. I played second man down to Teddy Gray, but that was my preference. But and then I had the trouble with my amateur, and I went under the horn in about 1981 or something. No, sorry, 1985, and I found that was much easier. I could last all day, and then eventually I was offered baritone, and I always wanted to play with the lower ensemble of the band. It's something I'd never done, of course, and the baritone is just in the middle somehow. But if you have a bass solo, for instance, then that will be included on the baritone. And I always remember because I'd done okay on horn, and they came back to me. They said, "Jimmy, we've got a horn player now. We've got a baritone player. Do you fancy going back on horn?" I said, "No." I said, "It's baritone or nothing." So I stayed there for about 12 years, on second baritone, that is. I would say probably my favourite test piece to play on both cornet, horn and baritone was Pageantry by Herbert Howells, because I do think that it's one of the finest pieces ever been written for brass band. But I'm not ruling out other pieces like Epic Symphony. That was a tremendous test. I always loved playing that. And Lorenzo, of course, because we won on it. And I could name a lot that I've really enjoyed. In fact, the band are rehearsing contest music at the moment. And that's it's sat up the back there, it's bringing quite a lot back to me, actually, because it's, I'm actually reading more into the piece now, after all these years, you know, yes. I had a break from the band from 1967 to about 74, until my wife had her first heart operation, and then I came back, and as regards the library, I was involved with the library from 1980, but I didn't take it on full time myself till 1983. So if I live till 2023, I'll have had it for 40 years. And Granwell has been with me most of that time. The Albert Hall really stands out because it's just a magnificent venue. The Festival Hall, there's several halls in London and all over England I've really enjoyed, but I think probably the Albert Hall was the greatest experience for me. It's big, it's open, it's easy to play there. You know, it's you know, and I don't know. I could probably name others abroad as well. We played at Buckingham Palace in 1983, and we also met the Queen. I was one of the people that met the Queen. Sadly, all the band didn't meet the Queen, which is a bit disappointing from me. But Howard Snell and a few more of us met the Queen. It was only, we just played on the court, outside, where the balcony is. And the Queen couldn't come to the balcony because they have to have so much security and all that. And we went, when we finished the concert, the coach was round the other side, so we went round and we cut through Buckingham Palace, and I've never seen so many pictures and paintings of Queen Victoria. They were everywhere. You know, it was just amazed me. Oh, yeah, well, Bellevue was a massive wooden tent. I think it probably seated about 6,000 people, maybe more than that. 6,000 people, and there was no token covering on the seats. They were just wooden seats, so it was comfortable. And you got half the hall smoking, and the other half drinking. And and apart from that, you got a whooping sound that the bobs were making outside, and the elephants on the other side, and you could actually hear these. And that's why Fred Mortimer didn't like going to Bellevue. He said he didn't mind competing with the bands, but he couldn't compete with the elephants. That's not my word, that's Bram Gay who actually said that. No, I never played with Fred Mortimer. Fred Mortimer died 4 years before I came here. Only Alex and Harry. Well, I didn't play much under Alex. Probably Granville probably did more, and he did the one concert under him that. Well, he was probably, I don't know. I think Alex Mortimer was probably the best, from musical ability of the Mortimers. I thought he was the best. Harry was obviously the showman and the star, if you like. He was always at the top, and nobody ever got there where he was. Rex was the lesser, but he was a very fair-minded person. Rex was, you know, he's a very upright man, and he treated us all the same, you know, and well, it's a long time ago now, but he was really one of the old school. It doesn't work that way now, you know. And also you had committees, well, you still have committees running the band now, don't you? So I won't get into that. But we came back from Stanhope, and we got permission to get a lift back with Gordon Hindle. I don't know what we were doing. We were either going to Wigan, to Granville's house. We were doing something, because I did go to Granville's house a couple of times, many years ago. And we'd borrowed the post horn. And we were going past the band bus, and as this car was going, I was in the passenger seat. I went down the window and let go with the post horn galloper going past. And I thought after it probably wasn't the right thing to do. I don't know whether Granville had a dabble at it. I think he may have done. But anyway, next morning, which was the Monday, I think, it was, well, the next Monday, Rex sent for me. And I thought, oh, what have I done wrong? Anyway, I went outside his office and he says, come in. He didn't ask me to sit down. And he says, Jimmy, I'm only going to tell you this. He said, we don't have hooligans in this band. So if you ask Granville, he confirmed that. And I never did it again. I don't know if you want to put that on the website, I don't know. You cut it out if you want, it's up to you. Is that it?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That was our privilege.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. For both of you, that was just
Yeah.
fabulous.
I can remember that.
It did. We were different people in Granville, weren't we? I tell you what, in 1966, I got married. My wife was a Coventry girl, and we got married in 1966, so we came to Elworth. Well, there was a shortage of coal. And there was, at that time, Frank Hughes was in the band as well, a composer, Frank Hughes, and he was a back row cornet player. A very talented man, and a good friend of Granville's, had been for years, a good friend of mine. And I'd asked Granville would come from Wigan with a couple of bags of coal, because he had a Rover 90. A couple of bags of coal for me, you know. He didn't give them me, I had to pay him for them, but and we carried them up to the coal bunker, I'm not like it, at arm's length like that, because you couldn't, I'll tell you what, I couldn't even lift a bag of coal now. And Frank Hughes was to bring me a broken meat and potato pie, because they made pies. absolutely amazing. And if you've got a broken pie, am I right, Granville?
Oh,
That's a, yeah, and they were good quality pies, weren't they?
oh, yeah. Cheap.
That's it now. Everyone done?
Yeah, I got that last bit.
Okay.
Good. Good. Happy with all that?
Yeah,
really
really
good.
Right, thank you.
I suppose the inspiration for playing was Fodens Band in the early 1950s, 1956. And I'd seen them and heard them play, and that was the inspiration for, I decided I wanted to play cornet. So I started then with Middlewich Band at the age of 10. My brother gave me a few lessons first of all, but that didn't work out too well. So I went along to Middlewich Band to see a chap called Walter Powell. He was the sort of mainstay of Middlewich Band in those days and a very good teacher. And after a short while, I was able to join the band on third cornet. And yeah, so that was the start. Eventually then we found a battered old flugel in the instrument shops that I didn't recognise. He let me have a go on it and said, well, if you like it, we'll get you the proper band instrument to play and you can move on to flugel. So that's what I did. That was my start of banding. Yeah, I played for a number of years with Middlewich Band. They were 4-section band. My first contest, I think, was in 1963 at the area, the northwest area. A piece called Four Little Maids. We didn't get anywhere, but that was it. And then shortly after that, a number of contests, but mainly with Middlewich Band up to that time. Well, I came to join Fodens because in the early 1960s, I was studying business studies at Crewe College as a day class from work, and I had to write quite a long-winded essay on some subject of my choice. So the obvious one was the banding world, and Fodens Band history was, you know, the obvious thing to focus on. So I went along to Rex Mortimer to talk to him on the history of the band. And I think on the second or the third visit to him, he sort of said to me, I believe you're a budding young flugel player. Would you like to come and audition for the band? And the rest, as they say, is history. I joined in early 1967, I think, back to January, I think. My most memorable performance with the band was probably my last one. That was in the Albert Hall with the band on the Nationals and a concert, or two concerts in the evening afterwards, mass bands concerts. And that was a thrill, but it had sweet and sour feelings to it, if you like. Enjoyed the concerts and being with the band, but sadly I was leaving. Well, whilst I was at Fodens, we had resident conductor who was Rex Mortimer, but about once a month Harry Mortimer would come down and take the band on a normal rehearsal, and also prepare the band for any mass bands concerts, men of brass concerts that were coming up, or recordings, broadcasts, and all that sort of thing. And yeah, it was really interesting to play under both Rex and Harry Mortimer. I think my favourite venue to play at was the Albert Hall in London. Went there probably, I think, on 3 or 4 occasions. And that was probably my favourite place. But there were a number of large halls around the country. Huddersfield Town Hall, Wolverhampton Civic Hall, I can't remember the others. All very sort of great venues, and certainly ones that, you know, were really enjoyable to play in. I suppose my favourite test piece would be Resurgam by Eric Ball, and I think largely because of the mood of the music that he brought in. And I performed it, not so much with Fodens Band, but with other bands later in contest, But with Fodens Band and with Men of Brass, we performed it on numerous occasions with Harry Mortimer on Men of Brass performances, different places, different halls. And I always remember that apart from the music, apart from the mood of the music, there is one point at which ride cymbal just comes in and it just fades away. And Harry Mortimer just had that knack of being able to just point that and just allow it to fade and then bring the band in. And it was one of those moments always when the hairs on the back of my neck came up. I think I had many very happy memories with Fodens Band during a relatively short period. The first one, I suppose, was the very first concert I ever did with Fodens Band at Sandbach in the school on Middlewich Road. And I was sight reading most of the programme because it was early days for me. And at the end of the first half, they played a patrol. Jamie's, I think it was, but it might have been different. And just before we started it, George Bailey, who I was sat next to playing piano, leaned across and said, when we get to letter so-and-so, get up and walk off. And I thought, is this a wind-up? This could be, a bit disastrous if I do the wrong thing. So anyway, it got to the point, I hesitated for a moment, but then I got up and turned around, walked off through the side curtains. And when I turned around and looked back, nobody else had got up. And I thought, oh, my Fodens Band career has just gone down the pan at the first opportunity. And then a moment later, of course, the trombones got up, followed progressively by the rest of the band. And my heart started to beat a bit slower eventually. But yeah. Travelling on the band bus, the first time I ever had to go onto the band bus, I sat about near the front until somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, you can't sit there, that's somebody's seat. So I moved a little bit further down, the same thing happened. So eventually I ended up on the back seat next to Bob Shepley. Yeah, good times, funny times. Playing cards on the bus. I learnt very quickly not to play cards with Teddy Gray too long. Not if there was money involved anyway. But we had some real fun. And at that time, people like Neil Fryer, Wim Barnett, Rodney Booth, we were all of the same kind of age. And we did tend to, sort of group together when we were on a band job. Good memories. Well, I left Fodens in 1970 because I got married. And up to then, I handed him a notice in before then. And unfortunately, just 2 weeks before we were getting married, no replacement had turned up. So Rex came along and said, do you think you could do the contest on the 10th of October, the Nationals? And even though I said, well, we'll still be on our honeymoon, I said, well, you're not away really, are you? Can you do it? So I looked at it and said yes. And we went down to London, did the contest, did the concert in the evening, and then travelled back that same day. So that was the last time when I left Fodens Band in 1970, October. No intentions of playing after that. That was it. That was my banding career finished. However, once it's in your blood, and I played with a couple of bands locally. I went back and played with Middlewich Band for a couple of times, and then with Winsford. And then eventually they did a mass bands concert with Beresford's band in Congleton with Charlie Cook. And again, I was hooked. I went back playing with Beresford's on Third Man Down on cornet. But then a little bit later, I moved on to horn. And I started playing horn on bottom horn. And when the solo horn player decided he wanted to move on to flugel, and the lady who was sat next to me on first horn said, I'm not moving up, that's your job. So I ended up for the next 26 years on solo horn with Beresford's.
then it became Congleton Brass. I played with for a while with Hugh McGill and then David Evans. And then I retired from banding yet again, and but still went to help out a number of bands around the area if they needed a horn player. Bands like Silk Brass, Cheshire Constabulary. And eventually my grandson, who had been playing at Lions, played bass trombone with them, and then went to play bass trombone with Fodens Band. And I won't say dragged in, but I joined the band, and currently I'm playing first horn with Bollington. So that's it so far.